Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg. As always, here to discuss the opening week of college basketball and then preview the second week of college basketball. We're still not in the thick of things, but we did have some exciting games. Greg, how you doing?
Joe, you are 2 for 2 on pronouncing the podcast name correctly. I know we struggled with that early on in the year last year, so that's one more in a row, and it's a winning streak.
That's right. We came up with a title that might be a little bit of a word tumbler. Maybe it's just my stutter from when I was younger. But either way, and maybe it'll help us now that I'm pronouncing it right, get more followers as we go along this year. We'll remind everyone to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel for the Game House, and then also if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, to go like us there. We'll do that a little bit earlier this time. But Greg, we had a lot of close games, a lot of teams maybe underperforming. We had a couple interesting results. We're going to kind of get into a lot of the preview here. But any thoughts on just the almost upsets that maybe we aren't going to recap this week?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of these games, it almost kind of felt like it was round of 64 day of the tournament, where it was like these teams go down early, or there's an eye popping score at halftime kind of deal. And then, you know, some of these games ended up close towards the end. Carolina Elon comes to mind, even though, like, if you look at the box score, it was like 90-79 was the final, but that game was close for the majority of it. Um, if you want an overarching thought, I don't know if some of this is the product of a lot of these schools, complete roster turnover. Maybe it takes a little time to gel. I don't know, but we also see this stuff in March too. So
I think it might be just like college football, the same thing's happening where the NIL is getting players to, spread out a bit more. Everyone thought it would be like, oh, the rich are going to get richer, but I mean, Kentucky and Duke have always gotten their recruits, right? So like this might actually equalize a little bit of some of it. But there's some stuff like we don't even have in our list to talk about. Like Seton Hall lost to Fordham. Just like it's plenty of upsets wherever you go on a play design. I don't know if you ever saw the replay of the buzzer beater, Greg, but it was like the worst final play design of all time for Fordham to get the win. But it worked, so that's all that matters. Before we get started on recapping all of the games, do have to mention Todd Golden is going through a Title IX investigation. There are allegations that maybe he was stalking students on Florida's campus. Florida came out and said that he will continue as coach while the investigation is going on. Todd Golden has said basically that he's innocent, and he has a statement out there you can read for yourself, but that he's going to start flipping it now and doing defamation lawsuits going forward. So it kind of seems like a mess, and I think the biggest thing here is obviously we always say, like, we don't know what's going on more than anyone who can just read the statements. So we'll wait to see what comes out of Todd Golden, but I'm sure tough for the team to focus. And Greg, I don't know if they have enough talent, but like Florida State plays them this week, rivalry game. We're not picking that game, but just kind of quickly mention that like this Florida team has talent, but I don't know about you. I think it'd be hard to focus when your coach was caught up in this stuff.
yeah, I totally agree on the basketball side of that. I mean, this team, like you said, they have talent, they have pieces to be, maybe win a game or two in the tournament, just depending on how they progress throughout the year. But definitely a distraction. Although one of the teams we're going to talk about in a little bit had I would think was a huge distraction, and they seem to have turned it into a positive. But the off the court stuff, like, as with anything, it's allegations. Be careful to say too much. I believe the student newspaper, the Alligator, was the one that kind of broke the report and whatnot. So if you want to look up the piece yourself, go ahead. But it's creepy, weird. I mean, if there's a shred of evidence of this stuff, and mind you, Joe, he just got an extension. What, like 3-4 months ago? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like what, a 4-year extension? So it's just a weird situation all around. Florida, as a school, it sounds like and some of this stuff I wasn't aware of, but it sounds like there's been other hires that Strickland, that the AD has made, and they've less than worked out, not even from an on the court or on the field type play. So it sounds like if this stuff happens, people are calling for his head too.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll keep tabs on that throughout the year and how it affects on the court, and obviously once more comes out from a legal standpoint or a like official school standpoint, we will let you know on that. It is time now to recap the games from week one. We're going to start with Monday, which was the kickoff of the college basketball season. Now, we picked the Texas A&M UCF game, and honestly, it was obviously like a little bit of a duller week. We always talk about college basketball not really having a kickstart to the season. There were a couple good games, don't get me wrong, but we picked this game because it was on campus at UCF, and like we both picked Texas A&M in this one, Greg, but we thought that there was maybe potential for an upset, and it did happen. UCF was without some of their better players like Jalen Sellers and I think one or two others, and they beat Texas A&M 64-61. Greg, I am making you kind of take Texas A&M away from me. I'm not allowed to pick them in any big games anymore for the rest of the year, unless I override you, which I probably will do. But a lot of the same issues that we saw last year with Texas A&M, we loved them. We thought they were a good team that should be in the tournament, are rearing their heads again. So Wade Taylor playing inefficient basketball, 13 points on 15 shots, 4 of 15 shooting. All 4 of his field goals were from three-point range. Not really much. There's no there is no like Tyrese Radford to kind of bail him out and have be another guard there, in my opinion, on this team where they can score 30, 40 points together every single game. Henry Coleman, he's down to 12 minutes a game. Manny Obaseki was supposed to take a big step forward. He played 15 minutes a game. Hayden Hefner was supposed to come in and shoot for them and stretch the floor. He had 0 points. So I don't know why I thought this year might be different and why I ranked them in my top like 15 or 16 teams this year. I just really like Wade Taylor, but the problems are still there. It's all the same to me.
Yeah, I mean, like you can say they might be missing the Robin to their Batman this year, but Pharrell Payne transferred in. It looks like he had a decent game. I still think, Tyrese Radford was he had the ability to change the game. He could make some electric plays. He was versatile as a guard. They're probably missing that this year, and so what we're probably looking at, Joe, is this team goes as Wade Taylor goes. If we look up and Wade Taylor's got 32 on, 10 of 15 shooting or something like that, then they're probably going to win the game. And if he doesn't, if he has one of these inefficient days, then they're probably going to lose. But I will be too careful to make sweeping statements because we did mention this was at UCF. Kansas lost at UCF, although they had their problems last year, but Kansas lost at UCF last year. Maybe there's just something about this place. I don't know. I mean, it's not like UCF was a front runner in the Big 12 last year, but that's now we've got two, somewhat explainable but surprising results. So we'll just have to keep an eye on road games that happen at UCF.
Definitely have to keep an eye on that. And again, they were without their best player, Jalen Sellers, and some others. So impressive win for them. That could be a resume booster. I mean, I don't know if they'll be on the bubble by the end of it in that tough Big 12, but always nice to have that out-of-conference win. And Texas A&M, you're right. We'll see if Wade Taylor can lead them to something. I will be forever questioning guys like Henry Coleman going back to the place that put him back on the bench after he had some success earlier in his career. Last year he was on the bench, and then this year 12 minutes a game. And Anderson Garcia was like one of the leading rebounders last year. He came off the bench. So Manu Obaseki was a big part of last year's team. I thought he'd step in the starting lineup. I don't get what's going on down there. I know that until I have to see it first before I can pick them in a big game. So we'll see how that goes. All right, next game up on Monday, we have Ohio State and Texas. This one was in Las Vegas. I think I picked Ohio State. Greg, I think you picked Texas in this one. I don't have it on top of my list. I picked Ohio State because I liked the difference that they had in their guards. I remember talking about that. They have like Aaron Bradshaw transferring in as a former 5-star. They get the win 80-72. I really like John Mobley's play in this game, Greg. He was able to stretch the floor and provide something different than guys like Michi Johnson and Bruce Thornton. So that was, I think, kind of the difference there is that guard play. They have several ones they can go to. And then also for Texas, it really did look like a one-man show for a lot of the game. Now they have some guys out. They have like Tremont Mark was out for this game. But Trey Johnson going for 29 points, and then just, Kaluma had 10, Shedrick had 10. But it was a lot of the game was Trey Johnson just having to score for this team. Not a lot of faith I have to for a team that has to put that much on a freshman without much help, I should say.
Yeah, I'm not gonna really be able to sprinkle in anything else on that. Trey Johnson, he looks fantastic. He looked fantastic, and I blanking on the next team that Texas played, but I'm pretty sure he had another good game. Ohio State looks like they have They have some depth. They have some options. You know, I would love to see a little more from their inside game. I'd love to see Aaron Bradshaw develop, and if he can be, I mean, literally like maybe an 8 point, 6 to 8 rebound guy. I mean, this team's going to be scary. In a wide open Big Ten, it starts to not be crazy to start thinking maybe they're going to be top 3 in the Big Ten. We got some news out of Purdue we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's just I don't know where to go with the Big Ten yet. Joey, you picked Purdue too, correct? When we did our preseason and we picked. Okay, yeah. I mean, some of that is name on the front of the jersey, and we've seen some of these teams play now, but there's something to this Ohio State team, and I think there's a little bit more. As things go on, we got more and more faith in Diebler to lead the team.
I think so. We'll see how they progress throughout the rest of the season in Diebler's first full season as head coach. It'll be interesting to see how they do because maybe they, as you said, maybe they can make a run in the Big Ten with how things are sitting. Next game up, Greg, we have Baylor and Gonzaga. This was an in Spokane but neutral site game. This is a game where Gonzaga showed how important it was to have pieces coming back. I feel like we had. Nolan Hickman going for 17, Graham Ike for 15. It's Ryan Nembhard, I think, in both the games has been running the show very well. He had 11 assists in this one. So I like them as like a Final Four contender. I know a lot of people are that high on them. They're kind of like maybe in the second or third tier, but they proved like bringing that much talent back and then just filling in with key transfers that like the depth is better this year. That was the big concern about them last year. And if you have those guys coming together, that's great. For Baylor, it seemed like their defense was still a huge issue. That's been an issue for a couple of years now since Jerome Tang left for Kansas State, to be honest. But also, like, they don't have the most depth in the front court. I would say that it's like ready to play all that much. That had a factor, and VJ Edgecombe in his first college game did not really play well either.
Yeah, Joe, Gonzaga looks like the real deal. This looks like I don't know that I don't want to say I wasn't high on Gonzaga, but I wasn't like Final Four high on Gonzaga in the preseason. And after seeing this game, and maybe I'm sure there's going to be games where they're going to struggle. They're gonna lose. They're gonna lose games they shouldn't. They're that kind of thing. But it looks like the transfers that they brought in have given them that depth. Michael Ajayi looks good out of Pepperdine. I've heard Caliph and Khalif Battle, who's on his like 5th school. He had himself a couple of fantastic plays. It just looks like, again, Ryan Nembhard has a wealth of places to send the ball. Graham Ike, we've talked about. He had a great year last year, and Ben Gregg coming on. I mean, it's just like I don't want to just list players' names, but this is like opposite of what we were talking about with teams like Kansas last year. Kansas brings in Nick Timberlake and a couple of those guys, and then Marco Jackson doesn't turn out to be what he was supposed to be. And like this is the opposite situation. This is okay. We've brought in guys. Now the only thing I don't want to just rubber stamp them after one game, and we'll talk about another game. I guess we can. Yeah. I mean, they Arizona State takes them to the wire, but we know they have some talent. There's always been questions. The talent's never been the question for Arizona State. It's always been the Bobby Hurley. Can he coach the talent? That game was that was at the Kennel, right? Or am I?
No.
Where was that game?
It was. Yeah.
Okay. So, which is that's a bit of an odd result, but again, I still saw all of the things that I see. Like, yes, it was a close game, but all the things I saw them do against Baylor, a lot of the ball movement, a lot of the action. Like, I just like what I see in basketball. It's not quite like baseball where you're going to lose a ton of games and like that's okay. But basketball is you're not going to. We haven't had an undefeated team since Indiana. Like they're going to lose a game or two, and it's probably going to be to a team that they weren't, that they were favored to beat. That's okay. I just like what I see from this team. The only thing we didn't mention, poor Joe Few, being out there for 2 minutes and absolutely getting yammed on by VJ Edgecombe. That the guard play, that I mean, they're super athletic. Joe, I don't know, maybe you can speak more to the X and O's, but when I see a team that's this athletic, I know they maybe lack some size inside, with Norchad playing the 5 a lot, but it always makes me feel wild to think, like, how is this team not good at defense? How are these guards not able to ball pressure just like constantly, unless they're just saving all their energy for the offense?
Yeah, it seemed to me like they had struggles with like when there were picks and when to switch and just the coverage overall. When there was anything somewhat complex, I'm not saying like pick and rolls are complex, don't get me wrong, but like anything that required communication or movement or covering areas that you usually aren't responsible for, it just seemed like it was a mess. A lot of new faces on the Baylor, and whether that's transfers or freshmen. And I do think that they can get this figured out. But I think when we come down to it, I think this might be the same thing as last year, where it's like, oh, like last year they're a 3 seed, but like, are we sure they can go win the title? Is that defense good enough? Like, that's my biggest fear. Especially like I love Norchad Omier. I talked about him a lot last season when we did the podcast. Undersized big man. They are playing him at the 4 instead of like the 5 like Miami did. But I'm not sure the big men playing at the 5 spot are really that good as well. So we'll see how it pans out for him. But that was kind of my take on it. I did like the play of Robin Wright, the freshman guard as well, who came off the bench. He played well in Baylor's other game this week too. So I don't know. The defense is going to hold me up and make me think like some of it is X's and O's, like you're saying, Greg, and they can kind of work that out and figure it out. But they have the athleticism, and that is 90% of the battle, right? Like it's just you have to want to be a good defender, and they just simply have not looked like they want to be good defenders. So hopefully they can figure that out down the stretch for Baylor's title hopes, tournament hopes, whatever you want to say. All right, so next one, Greg, we have to talk about. We have Purdue struggling. They played Texas A&M Corpus Christi, but this isn't more about the result. They won 90-73. This is like the first game after the Zach Edey era, which seemed like it took forever. Braden Smith finished with 12 points, 8 rebounds, 15 assists. He's still going to be in the running for Big Ten Player of the Year, but the guards struggled with pressure during the game. I think that's kind of a fear people have, that now that you don't have the easy 7'4" guy to pass it into, if you pressure the ball, are you able to score? I mean, all this stuff is going to come to a head here. And then Miles Colvin didn't play probably as much as he should have for how good of a game he had. If you look at the minutes played versus how many points he scored, so I think there's a lot to figure out with this team. On top of that, Daniel Jacobson got hurt in this game. He's a 7-footer. He's a new one. And now you have to start wondering, in my opinion, Greg, like their offense has been so focused on having a big 7-footer, and he wasn't great in this game. He played pretty well, but like, how does that affect things moving forward? Can they get an offense going where not having that guy is going to open things up, maybe, or is it going to be worse for them? They have a lot to figure out, and while they are still probably the Big Ten favorites, I think their ceiling has probably lowered a little bit than maybe we thought even at the start of the season.
Yeah, you want to talk about identity crisis? Like now you're being thrown into it. That Jacobson's done for the year, so or at least it's like a fractured tibia, but it requires surgery. So I don't know how. I mean, that's over my head. I'm not a doctor or anything, but the thing I kept seeing was I know a couple people tweeted Braden Smith's stat line, and like, yeah, he did almost have a triple double, 12 points, 8 boards, 15 assists, and like that's eye popping, 15 assists. But like, I'm pretty sure. So we were at the Dayton game when this was going on, and I am pretty sure he had 5 turnovers in the first half. I remember looking when the score was somewhat close and looking at his stat line and being like, he already has 5 turnovers. I don't know that for a fact. Finished the game with 6. I guess 15 assists, 6 turnovers isn't that bad. Like when you look at the overall ratio, but I'm fairly certain like 5 of those were in the first half. So I mean, like when I'm picking this team to win the Big Ten, it was based on the backs of these guards. And I know they play a little better, and Lawyer had a really nice game in their next game, but I mean, if I was expecting to see some pretty big steps, that was part like a little bit of projection was part of this, and we already said it's an identity crisis. Part of it was, hey, they're going to have to play differently. It's going to be a completely new team without Zach Edey, and I thought they'd grow a little bit. Now there was always the possibility that there's some shock value to that. So let's give them a couple weeks. Let's see how they do with Jacobson out. There's going to be an adjustment period. Don't write them off just yet. I'm with you. They're still the favorites to win the Big Ten, but that ceiling, maybe that ceiling before was a second weekend team. It's probably, unless I see a huge jump from these guards, it's probably not anymore. Like, I think you at this point maybe be happy to win a game or two, or win a game in the tournament.
Yeah, we'll see what Matt Painter can do with this roster. There still is a lot of talent there. It's just going to be like a different type of play. Greg, let's just get through all the Big East stuff we have on here. We have like Big East woes, but let's start with the bright side, then we'll get to the rest of the stuff all in one. Starting with the good stuff, Ryan Kalkbrenner, 49 points in the game against UT Rio Grande Valley. This is a player who's been there forever. He's made All Big East Defensive Player of the Year. He's done a lot of things. Hasn't exactly gotten the shine I think a lot of people do, maybe because he's at Creighton, maybe because he's a big guy. So props to him for that. We had Villanova losing to Columbia and Kyle Neptune going possibly even on the hotter side of the hot seat, the hottest they could possibly get. I don't know how else to put that. We have Xavier, kind of slow starts. They have to come back in these games. Sean Miller said they're a bad team. They're just not playing perimeter defense right now. And then Butler loses to Austin Peay. And Butler has like some talent that came in. It wasn't like they're going to be Big East bottom feeders this year. At least that's not what they were projected to be. So that's like four different things. The one good thing, Kalkbrenner gets the 49, and Creighton looks like they're okay. But then the other bad things, Greg. So I guess the overarching point is like, what do you make of the Big East right now after week one?
I'm with you. We kind of talked before the season, like, hey, 3 bids last year. What's it going to look like this year? Hey, I think they'll be better. And some of these teams do look like they're going to be better, but it's starting to make us question. I know, Joe, you've said maybe not in these exact words, but like, can these smaller private schools compete in the new era? Obviously, UConn's doing it. Well, they're not. They're a Big East team, but they're not quite in the same vein as the rest of the Big East, right? So they work a little bit differently, and they also have what will eventually be a Hall of Fame coach. Not that there's not a lot of others in the Big East, but he is at the top of his game right now today. So it's worrying. I love conferences like this that are basketball centric, and it does seem like maybe it's just an ebb and flow thing in terms of maybe they'll it's a couple of years of kind of down basketball. We don't need to write this year off yet, but it does look like there's going to need to be some really good coaching jobs. They do have the coaches in the conference to do it, so the only other thing is Kyle Neptune is now Kyle Mercury with how hot his seat is. So, and I did not write that down. You can look at my sheet of paper. I just thought of that right now. So
there's the dad joke we needed. Yeah, his hot seat. Villanova fans are kind of apathetic. And again, it's not like totally on like. Yes, Villanova was good with Jay Wright, and it has taken a step down. I don't think it's all on him. I think the landscape of college basketball changed, and that's why Jay Wright got out. But the cupboard wasn't barren. We'll put it that way. He's definitely be doing better than this, losing to schools that have even less resources than him. But you're right. I think the overall point about the Big East having those issues moving forward, the good news is right. They have good coaches. I would say this is still a 5-6 bid league when it comes down to it, especially if teams start figuring it out. I expect Xavier to get better. I expect St. John's, Rick Pitino. They had a rough first half against Quinnipiac a couple of days ago. So I expect them to figure things out and kind of have more teams than just UConn and Creighton in the tournament when we're all said and done.
I want to do this off the cuff, just rapid fire. I'm going to go team by team. Obviously, we're in week 1, but you tell me yes or no they make the tournament. And if they're going as I have the standings pulled up. Obviously, there's been no conference games yet, so these are in technically no particular order. Creighton,
in.
Okay. St. John's,
in.
UConn,
in.
If you value your life, that's your answer. Marquette,
in.
DePaul,
out.
Xavier,
in.
Georgetown,
out.
Providence,
Probably out.
Villanova,
Out.
Butler,
Out.
Seton Hall.
Out.
Okay, so that's 5,
Yeah.
right?
Probably out.
You said 5 or 6. So there's obviously, of course, there's the we're only in week 1. I agree with you on every single one. I think Creighton's definitely going to be in. St. John's definitely going to be in. UConn's definitely going to be in. Marquette's definitely going to be in. Xavier may be a little bit of a question mark, but there's always the possibility that we get a 6 team from that group. There's good coaching. There's talent. You know, there. I think you got it. I think you got it pretty much nailed down. So good job. Good job, Joe.
Well, yeah, I'd say the one team I would say that could make it is Providence, but they looked pretty rough in their first game against Central Connecticut State. Looked better against Stonehill, but also they had the biggest story in college basketball, Greg, this week. They had someone bring in a duck to the student section, and as a emotional support duck, and now they're not letting the duck back. So I think they might be cursed. I don't know. They won the next game, but
hey, the dunk would have let the duck in. The amp, whatever their name, Amico, whatever, that they're not as cool. The only other thing, Joe, Bryce Hopkins not playing right now, so
right.
I think we could give them a little bit of a leash. Maybe it'll give these guys, a little bit of time to mesh, and just when Bryce Hopkins comes back, I picked him as, one of my I think I picked him as Big East Player of the Year. Now I didn't realize. I thought he was going to be ready for the season. I didn't realize he was still going to be missing a little bit. But when did he have the injury?
It was pretty early. I thought it was like 8 to 10 games in. So it's almost been like almost a full year. So that's
I feel like we're talking about there's other guys that we're talking about that had injuries like after that are playing now. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but and each one is always different. But
yeah. All right, well, we'll keep it moving. We'll check in on the Big East as the season goes along as one of the most interesting conferences. I don't know if you could say deepest. I don't know if you could say the best overall right now, like we've said with other conferences, but definitely one of the more interesting ones. We're going to go to Friday with possibly the game of the week, Greg. This is Kansas hosting UNC. Now, this game looked over around halftime, a 20-point lead for Kansas. Really, I think the environment maybe rocked UNC. We love seeing these on-campus games. The neutral site games are fine, but like being on campus, having like the crowd affect people is just so much fun. Now, from what I saw, Greg, from this game, Kansas's depth is a lot better than last year. That's the one thing they had to address, much like Gonzaga that we mentioned a couple minutes ago. They had to address the depth. They got an AJ Storr. He had a big factor in this one, 13 points. They brought in Zeke Mayo. He scored 21. One of those two should probably end up starting for David Coit, who's did not have a good game in this one, and also like 5'11", probably should come off the bench for them. But that really did have an effect. Now, some of the issues were also the same as last year, too. So you do have some paint cloggers with Dickinson and Adams. That works well. I liked Dickinson passing to Adams from the high post to the low post, or one side of the post or the other. And DeJuan Harris is still a very good point guard. So there are things that like you can exploit. Maybe the paint cloggers. Maybe the shooting. If they have an off night, you can still get them. UNC, I thought a lot of guys grew up in this game from even the first half to the second. Greg, RJ Davis, we knew what we were going to get at him. 18 points, and 16 points. Sorry, and he was 3 of 15 shooting, so not the best game from him. But we had other guys like Seth Trimble had never really played this way in a big game like this. 19 points for him. Elliot Cadeau, 12 points. He had some really good passes. They maybe didn't get the most out of their freshmen. But Ian Jackson had a pretty big game. He had 10 points. He had a couple threes. We needed the freshmen to step up for UNC to for us to believe in them. And Ian Jackson took that one step forward that kind of pushed him over the hump and got him to compete in this game. So I think you come away from this game being very happy for both sides. Kansas, you get the win, and you look like you have some extra firepower over last year's team that maybe held you back. And UNC, Trimble stepping up, Cadeau maybe looking like he took a step forward, Ian Jackson playing big in some big moments. I think you have to think like, hey, if you get better the rest of the year, these two teams could be ones that end up in the Final Four.
Yeah, I know I saw someone else somewhere say there's no moral victories, but when you're down 20 at Fog Allen, playing against a much better Kansas. I think a much better team for Kansas than they were last year, or at least at very minimum, much deeper. They maybe missed some guys. Like this team would obviously be better with a couple of guys that they lost from last year, but I like what they have. This this is as close to a moral victory as you can get if you're Hubert Davis, if you're a Carolina fan. Trimble, I know he had 20 or 22 in the Elon game, so he's already got a couple of games where he's been a big scoring contributor. Cadeau seems to have command of the ball. Really like how they spread it out. RJ Davis is going to be he's not always going to be this inefficient. That's the fact that it's a 92-89 game and your best player had 3 of 15 shooting. Again, I'll take that. On the Kansas side, it's just like I was talking about with Gonzaga. I like the guys they brought in. I was maybe too low on this team, and I know they were obviously ranked number 1 in the AP, but I think just because of the issues from last year, I know they brought in guys, but maybe I just had that attached to that little bit of wariness where it's like, well, they brought in guys last year and that didn't really work out, but it looks like they hit on every single guy they brought in. Between Zeke Mayo, he had a game here, and I'm pretty sure he had who did they played another game. I'm pretty sure he had a really efficient game, that one. But the biggest thing for me was Dajuan Harris, 4 fouls, and he was out for a significant portion of this time. If this was last year, this team is done.
Yep.
Done.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they can carry, I know they were up, they were up pretty handedly when he went out, but still, that is something that would be the game would be over. By the time he got back in, Carolina would have been up, 15 points. It's just forget about it. There's just a depth to this team. I mean, AJ Storr was 17 points a game last year. He's like the second guy off the bench. We got 5-star Flory Badunga, who's got a fun name to say. He had, on top of the 8 points and boards that he had several shots that, it's always the blocks don't go in the blocks go in the stat sheet, but the shots affected don't. I'm sure there's some advanced metric person now that tracks, shots affected, but this team's it really does have the depth that it didn't have last year.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned last episode that I don't know whether this is still a tournament team yet. Whereas, hey, regular season Kansas is going to win their fair share of games. But with the paint cloggers, I don't know if the shooting. But I think they have a path to get better this year and prove to me, hey, this is a team I can pick to win the national championship. Whereas, last year we were both so far out on them winning the national championship.
We both.
Yeah.
You picked Samford, did you not? I know I picked Samford. No, it didn't work out. But I thought you did too.
No, I picked Kansas to win the first round game. I picked Gonzaga to beat them. Even though I had the same issues with Gonzaga and their depth, I like Gonzaga better than Kansas last year. So I think it's just something to watch. Do they maybe go with all these guards they have, and even Griffin from Alabama transferring in? Do they go smaller in certain instances where they can match up better? It's really nice to have those 2 big guys, but I want to see how they utilize them. They really did a good job of getting Dickinson kind of by himself in the post and had guys front him. He throw it over the top, and they'd go get the basket. They did a good job of passing from one to the other. That works sometimes, but when other teams have bigs who can match up with them better, which I don't think North Carolina has the best bigs this year after losing Armando Bacot, that's what I need to see stuff like that. Are they going to go small? How are they going to use those guys? That would get me to feel very good. But I do think they have the guard play. You mentioned Zeke Mayo, the Lawrence, Kansas kid. The beauty of the transfer portal. I know everyone's a lot of people are down about the transfer portal. He goes to South Dakota State, becomes their leading scorer, and then is able to transfer back home to the school he wanted to play for his whole life. So that's really cool. That was a big game. Greg, we'll move on to New Mexico beating UCLA. Your Mountain West conference, Greg, might be back. We might be seeing some stuff here. Although we don't have this on here either, but Boise State ended up losing to San Francisco. Boise State lost to San Francisco, which WCC might be back. I don't know. But New Mexico wins this one 72-64. Nelly Jr. Joseph has a big game for them. He is probably him and Den are the 2 big players. They both had good games. UCLA, I would say they've talked about this team as being a top 25 worthy team and having talent, but I think hearing it from the head coach when he said, we don't know who's going to be the leading scorer, we don't know what our offensive identity is from a coach who historically has had problems with the offense. I think that to me was telling. That's why I didn't have them in my top 25 to start the year. Is just I didn't think the offense was good, and they were bad. Like they shot from the field. They shot 36.4% against New Mexico, which is obviously not a power conference team, even though they have good players. I don't know how this gets better for them throughout the season, Greg. Maybe you see a path that I don't, but that was to me the biggest thing. Is like their leading scorer had 23 points, 8 of 20 shooting. It wasn't like a great shooting day, so someone had to step up and shoot the ball, I guess. But I think this might be a team that people don't want to play because of the defensive toughness. But how do they win their own games? How do they win enough to make the tournament? I don't know.
I feel like if this team wasn't in the Big Ten, we would just be like, this team is like probably an NIT team, but they're in the Big Ten. And it's just this amorphous blob right now, which I think the way we're looking at this team in particular is probably like it speaks to how we look at the Big Ten right now. You know, really don't know what we're looking at. Like maybe give them 2-3 weeks and they'll figure it out. I mean, you know, Mick's a good coach. Maybe they'll nail down an identity, but this is not the kind of start you want to have. You know, again, it's we're not going to make any sweeping statements about any of these teams after seeing them play once or twice, but there's definitely things you can glean that you're like, I like this, I don't like that. And I'm not going to repeat anything you said, but yeah, I mean, like, I just look up and down the roster and like, it's fine. You know, it's filled with, guys that are former, top 100 recruits or transferred in where they, were good at their previous destination, but I just don't have the same feeling about this team as I do, some of the other teams we talked about tonight. Some of that is just that gut feel, but I wouldn't be like if we looked up in February and they're like 12th in the Big Ten, even though I don't know where they were picked in the media poll, but I have to imagine it was probably like somewhere between 3rd and 5th.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't be completely. There's very few Big Ten like standings that you could show to me, and I'd be like, I'm shocked. I just don't know what to make of some of these teams.
Yeah, and just a quick point on this, Greg, because I know we don't have the most time, but the Big Ten, like we talked about Ohio State, like Michigan has had some spurts where they've looked okay, good, and I'm like, they might be better than you think. So, Northwestern played Dayton. They obviously ended up losing, but they don't have Brooks Barnheiser. Could that be? They were picked, I think, 17th or 18th in the Big Ten. So it's just like one of those things where you're right, like could be it literally could be out of left field who wins this conference. So it'll be fun to watch, but I just don't see UCLA being the team that comes out of that conference as the winner. Possibly not even a tournament team. We will see how they bounce back. We'll go over to Saturday games, Greg. The first one we're going to get to is the Tennessee-Louisville game. This was at noon. It was kind of the biggest game of the day to start things off at least, and before we got other ones. Tennessee wins this one 77-55. We got to see Zakai Ziegler have a good game. It looks like he could possibly be an All-American. Chaz Lanier coming in as a transfer. Looks like he could maybe be that Dalton Connect role, even though he's not the same player. He had 19 points in 29 minutes. So that's like maybe fills that role for him because they have a lot of role players on this team, but we didn't know if they had the scoring punch. At least I didn't know if they had the scoring punch. They got the job done. Other hand, Louisville is a team made up entirely of transfers, like entirely new players. Some guys from smaller conference teams. We talked about Kashawn Pryor from USF. He came off the bench in this one. Terrence Edwards. Chucky Hepburn was from Wisconsin, but not like a go-to guy, not like a scorer. It feels like an island of misfit toys to me, Greg. I thought they were going to make the tournament coming into the year. I just don't know. I like Pat Kelsey as a coach. I just don't know if he's able to mold this team into something better than they can, like better than they are. I don't know if he can get them to that point. I will give him a longer leash in a couple months to get there before I really have any judgments. But I do think it's right now it feels like that island of misfit toys since we're getting around Christmas time here.
Yeah, if you're going to give any team a long leash, it's the team that is the roster is literally completely new. Like there's not a single player from last year. I'm with you on that. Tennessee, I mean, I'm with you. Like, great. We maybe got a couple of transfers, not on the Dalton Connect level, but filling that role, just kind of like you said. The only thing that like really sticks out to me is 11 Zakai Ziegler turnovers. I don't like that, especially as much as he's going to be handling the ball. Um, Other than that, I mean, like they did what they won by 22 on the road. You can't ask like that is the only thing that like I am gonna say I don't like. Other than that, you know, they did what they were supposed to do.
Absolutely. All right, we'll move on to the next one, Greg. This, like I said, that was the starter to the day, the big Saturday of college basketball. Next, we had Baylor and Arkansas. This game was in Dallas, and Baylor looked like a completely different team in this one. I would say just getting contributions from so many different people. Like I think there was 5 double-digit scorers in this one. Everyone looked like they played a pretty good game. I think VJ Edgecombe did have a bad shooting night again. I think that will come. I do like him as a player. Just kind of pointing that out. But on Arkansas's side, it feels kind of similar to Kentucky. It's hard to say that, but like it's a big early season game. You know, John Calipari rolls out that we had 5 guys. We couldn't scrimmage as much as we could before. You know, we weren't prepared for zone. How do you not know people are going to zone you? It's worked so much against you in the past. And while I think the team has talent and they obviously played well against Kansas in the preseason, it feels like he's gonna get this team to a point where they're like a good team in college basketball, but the ceiling I think might be limited because they don't have they don't have everything figured out from the X's and O's standpoint to beat his own, which he admitted in this little press conference after the game. So talent wise, top 20 roster in college basketball. I just don't know how it ends up working, and it feels like John L. Davis was kind of a shell of himself too. He's supposed to be like the veteran scorer on this team. Feels like a shell of himself. Boogie Flan's awesome, but he had a bad shooting night in this one too. So I don't know how else to say it, but it just felt, as a Kentucky fan, it felt very similar to other early season games that I have experienced, whether it's getting blown out by Zion Williamson and Duke or whatever. So that's what I got.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but again, we'll give Arkansas a little time to figure things out. New coach, it is worrying when you hear. It does make me feel better since we're coaching a 5th grade team this year that like I feel like I don't have all the answers for some things on offense. Calipari doesn't either, so that makes me feel a lot better personally.
Can you recruit better than him? Oh, you got to go get those 5th graders.
doesn't really work like that in our program, but like the answer from Baylor. Obviously, this game was played a lot closer to home, but it's still, can't. It was yeah, I know it was a close game, but 4 of the 5 starters in double figures. Robert Wright has another good game. He may turn out to be like the second best freshman in the Big 12. I feel like there was a couple other guys that we talked about when we were talking about freshmen of the year, but he's coming off the bench right now, and I just feel like when he's on the floor, they're a significantly better team right now.
Absolutely. I will say that I think he showed a lot of poise in that game too, or when he was running the point too. I think is going to be helpful to them because they have so many guys who have some experience running the point, whether it's Jeremy Roach or other people, but they can also play off ball. So I think it's going to be really good to see how they divvy up those minutes, who runs the offense, and for Arkansas too, 5 of 20 from 3. Seen that with Kentucky. They had better 3-point shooters last year. They leaned into it. In this day and age of college basketball, where people are spacing out and shooting threes, who's going to be their go-to scorers? I mean, you got to think John L. Davis will figure it out. But is DJ Wagner starting at the 2? Is he going to be able to kind of figure out how to shoot the ball better? Is Boogie Flan going to be a good shooter? He doesn't really project to be a good shooter this year. I mean, maybe he does change that. So, lots to figure out with both these teams. But did like the response from Baylor. The next game, Greg, that we will go over is going to be the Houston and Auburn game. And this was interesting because Auburn started flying to Houston to play them, and then there was an altercation on the flight between 2 reserve players that made them turn around and go back to Auburn. And then they had to fly out the next day to go to play Houston. Not the ideal thing. The good news, we'll start with the good news. Auburn wins this game. They look like a team that might be better than maybe even we thought, possibly. They have some depth. Janai Broom's still there in the middle, 20 points in the game. Greg, you mentioned Pettiford. You texted me about Pettiford. He had 21 points as a freshman after not scoring in their first game. That was really good for him. And it seemed like they were making light of the joke. Like after the game, they were doing an airplane celebration and everything. The bad news is you have a bad locker room problem, and I don't know if what's gonna make that better because what I think his name's Jakai Howard was one of the guys who was in the fight. Um, he in the first game, now the video is surfacing of him being a terrible teammate, where he's like loafing in the corner, getting mad when he's not past the ball. It's just like a lot's to fix there. So I don't know if it's kicking those guys off the team. I don't know if it's, hey, you guys, you're not going to play anymore. Bruce Pearl is a guy who I think would figure it out, but that was the bad news for Auburn. Good news is they won the game. Good news is they got good contributions. And for Houston, looks like they're still recovering from not having Jamal Shed, although they did get contributions from tons of players, so it's good to see that depth.
Yeah, I was just gonna say with Auburn, like I'm gonna leave it to Bruce Pearl's hands, but I also wouldn't be surprised if something comes out next week and it's two players have been dismissed from the like I don't know if like that would make them the scapegoat and it's like, oh yeah, the locker room problem's better, or like if there's really more going on there and Bruce Pearl doesn't think that, we obviously weren't in the locker room. We don't know all the all of the details behind it. Amazing that they're able to win this game just with everything surrounding it. Still like what I saw from Houston. Cryer struggled to shoot the ball in this game. You're always going to struggle to shoot the ball against. I mean, this game was exactly what you thought it would be. I mean, it is gritty, in-your-face defense, really well-coached teams. These are teams that, we're going to be seeing probably I would imagine both of them in the second weekend. And I'm with you. I remember asking Joe. I was like, Joe, I don't understand on paper why people have got Auburn picked over Arkansas in the SEC, and now I feel like an idiot because it takes 5 minutes watching both those teams and being like, yeah, this Auburn team right now today they are a lot better.
Definitely. All right, Greg, that is our recap of last week. We're going to go into our picks. Remember, this is the week where we have the Champions Classic, so there are some good games on Tuesday. We'll have the college football playoff rankings in between, so get ready for a late night. Although I think they moved up the start time on the first game in this one, so maybe it'll be a little bit better.
6:30.
6:30. So we have the first one we have is Michigan State and Kansas, Greg. This game's in Atlanta, so neutral site. I'm gonna speak for myself real quick, but 1% chance Michigan State wins this game, maybe.
Yeah, especially after what I saw this weekend. Again, I know Carolina came back and made the game close, but there's no chance that I'm picking against Kansas right now. It's one of those weird situations, Joe. I don't want to speak for you, but I haven't had a chance to watch every team. There's not enough hours in the day for me to watch all 50 or 60 teams that I want to that's going to come throughout the season. So I haven't really seen a lot of Michigan State. I've maybe looked at some box scores and stuff, but there's very little that you could show me right now that I would be picking it. I feel like the only team that I might pick against Kansas right now is Gonzaga. Maybe Bama, maybe, but that's probably the only team that sight unseen you could put on paper. And I would just say, yeah, I might pick them over Kansas, but yeah, right for this game, it's Kansas.
I did watch a little bit of Michigan State. Akins is a good player, a good guard. I don't know what else they have at the position. Jeremy Fears has 8 assists per game. That's nice, but they're so stacked in the front court that it just feels like a weird team where they're going to have to play like it's 2000 or a 1990s, basketball where there's a lot of big guys on the floor. Jackson Kolar's played well. Cohen Carr was a high recruit. Xavier Booker was a highly rated recruit. Frankie Fiddler is a forward who's playing a lot, who's a transfer. I don't know if the guard, and Carson Cooper too, I think played a lot last year. So I don't know if the guards are good enough or if they have the guard depth to really do anything this year. So when we're talking about teams we're low on in terms of the Big Ten, I'm as low as I probably ever have been on a Michigan State team under Tom Izzo. I think they're right there with UCLA, where if they didn't have, for UCLA, maybe the Big Ten, for Michigan, maybe just Michigan State just having the brand. I don't know if we're talking about a team that makes the tournament if it's not, hey, we have Tom Izzo. And that they do have good recruits. They have talent, but the way it meshes, I think, is different. So I'm going Kansas in this one. And honestly, it might, as good as Kansas is, it might be more about just how I'm not high about Michigan State. But I will be happily proven wrong if Michigan State upsets them in this one. Next game, Greg, we have is Duke and Kentucky. obviously mentioned they played a lot in the Champions Classic with a Zion a couple of years ago. Um, this is going to be an interesting matchup. We have a lot of the freshmen on Kentucky this time, a lot of the older players a lot of the freshmen on Duke this time, a lot of the older players on Kentucky. What do you make of this game, Greg? I think this is one of the more interesting games we're going to see.
Yeah, I think if you had made me pick this game before the season started, I would have just like check mark Duke. Thanks, like let's move on. Um, but seeing how Kentucky has been, there's just a lot of contributing factors. There's a lot to like about the team. I think they're going to be better than I thought they were. I'm still going to pick Duke to win this game. We didn't talk about them before this just because they didn't really play any notable games. But Joe, I mean, all the talk in the preseason we were talking about, you know, Cooper Flag and all that stuff, and it's been Con Canoopel that's been, kind of running the show and kind of making most of the noise. So that's good for them because it just might mean that they have more to work with than they thought. I think we're going to learn a lot about both teams from this game because I don't think either of these teams have been challenged yet. I mean, if you want to say, I know Duke played Arizona State in the charity exhibition, it absolutely blew them out of the water. But like real games, that count for your tournament record, neither of these teams have really been challenged, and that may be speak more to how good both of these teams are. That I think that may like I'm saying that we obviously saw some of these good teams struggle against bad teams, and neither of these teams did, in their first couple of games. So this is one I'm really looking forward to, but the pick is Duke for me.
Pick is Duke for me as well. Love what I've seen out of Kentucky so far, and I do think they're, for a team full of transfers and new faces, they're meshing together very well. That offense from Mark Pope is very, very good. The ball movement is there. I've seen rival fans say, "Man, they're just like the freaking Warriors." Now we got to watch that crap again. So that's going to be fun to see all year. But I think Duke is on the right track, and what I mean by that is they identified Cooper Flag. They signed Cooper Flag. He is a freshman who I think could have a Anthony Davis like impact and be the freshman who leads his team to the NCAA title, which not many can do that. We have Carmelo Anthony, I think, and Anthony Davis might be the only two, right? Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but that's what going through my head. I think he can have that type of effect on the team, and he's showing it already. His defense, he has 2.5 steals a game. He has 1.5 blocks per game so far this year. He has a side kick in Con Canoopel, who's played very well, and Anthony Davis had Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who obviously now people don't like him because he didn't shoot well in the NBA, but in college he was a monster, especially defensively. The thing that I'm worried about mostly is the same thing we worried about last year for Duke, is just the guard play. Like Caleb Foster running more of the point this year. Does that help? Is Tyrese Proctor if there's somehow a game where Cooper Flag gets shut down, can those guys do what's kind of like necessary to win? And like I mentioned with that 2012 Kentucky team, there were times where Deron Lamb had big games and shot the lights out of the ball when Kidd-Gilchrist and Anthony Davis were done. There were times where Terrence Jones stepped up as a forward. There was times where even Marcus Teague, who did not have like maybe the best season out of the freshman guards for Calipari at Kentucky, they stepped up. So that's what I'm looking for. In this game specifically, the ball movement I think will make the defense tough for Duke, but I do think Cooper Flag is a good equalizer. I will take Duke in this one. Do think it's going to be pretty close when it's all said and done. But that's what I'm looking for, Duke long term, because I do think you should be looking at this in terms of we have Cooper Flag for 1 year. Let's try to win a national title. And if any other standard being held to them, I think is just not genuine. So, all right, that's the games on Tuesday. We have a lot of games Friday. Now, they schedule a lot of these Friday games because there's still college football going on, still NFL going on, so I don't want to make these on Saturday or Sunday. We'll start it off with Alabama at Purdue on Friday. Ticket prices I saw were like $400 something at different points. So Greg and I may have tried to go to the game, but I don't know if it's in the budget.
Yeah, I don't know what the podcast budget I think is zero. So that's a little bit more than zero. I'm gonna pick Bama in this game. I can't imagine you to be picking any different, even with Purdue. This is at Mackey. Even with this being a home game for Purdue, we don't need to rehash everything we've already said about them on this show. Bama's in a better play. I mean, they had their struggles in their opening games, but they're the better team right now. I'll say this. I feel more confident about picking Kansas over Michigan State, but I feel pretty darn confident about picking Bama over. I didn't have the greatest week picking games specifically for our pod last week. I think I went like 2-5, not good. Although, I mean, we obviously picked the games that we think are going to be good games, but still, not a great week for me. But I say this one with a fair amount of certainty.
I do too, and I think with Jacobson out of the lineup and that size out, I don't know what you can say that Purdue does better than Alabama. Because I think Mark Sears is a better player than Braden Smith. I think they have more versatility. I think they can shoot the ball better. Like Purdue can shoot pretty well, but like Alabama is Nate Oates. They're going to shoot the threes. So I'm going to go Alabama in this one, and I don't even know if it'll be close, especially if they're able to pressure the ball like other teams have in the past to Purdue. Next one up, Greg. I added this one late to our pick sheet, but we're going to do it. Marquette at Maryland on-campus game. This is going to be, I think, a fun one because, on Friday there'll be a couple games we're checking out, but a lot of people's first chance to see Derek Queen for Maryland, who had a very good debut.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Marquette. Probably no surprise, but this Maryland team does look like they might be better than we thought. They're actually playing right this very second. I know the Big Ten sometimes does that. It's kind of like the Big East. They do those early start games, and he is already like they're basically not even in the second timeout, and he's got a couple. Did he start? Because he started tonight. I don't think he started their first game.
I don't recall whether
he started. He started tonight. Him and Julian Reese in the front court tonight. So team looks like they're going to be better than we thought they were, but I'm still picking Marquette. Cam Jones and company look like, this is just this might be a game that, like, if they played 2 months from now and Maryland has some time to gel and develop, it might be a different answer, but for now I'll pick Marquette.
Thought about taking Maryland, couldn't do it. I'm going Marquette as well. Love the Cam Jones stepping up this year. He's a leader on the team. I saw that one of their players took a hard foul at the end of the game, and they were up on a team this past week, and like he went and stood up for his player. I love that leadership. I think they get the win here, but I think you're right. I think what you said, like, we kind of have to see it first with Queen to see, like, how is he going to play against such a good team and all that stuff. So Marquette in the game, but excited to watch that one. The next one we're going to do is Arizona at Wisconsin. This is on campus as well. Wisconsin. The reason this is on the sheet is because Arizona obviously has some higher aspirations than Wisconsin this year. But Wisconsin's that team, Greg, where every time you start to think this is going to be a bad year for them, they have a good year. And every time you think they're going to have a good year, it's a bad year. So could be trouble for Arizona, who's still getting a lot of new contributors on their feet wet.
Arizona with their last game, 102-44 over Old Dominion. That is not that is a Division I team, and they are in the Sun Belt. Like, this is, that we see some weird results during the first week, but like that kind of score gap, that's a pretty wide one. I want to stay away from just listing players' names, but I'll take Arizona. I just think right now, I hate picking all of these away teams with these on-campus games, but we've seen teams lose at home in the last week to worse teams than these teams are playing right now on the road. So, I think I would have more to say if I had seen 2 or 3 games out of these teams, but for now it's just like I'm still kind of going off paper of what I thought of these teams in the preseason.
Yeah, John Tonji scoring 17.7 points a game for Wisconsin. That's your only hope. I mean, Stephen Crowell's good on the inside. He can match up with some of the big guys for Arizona, but I don't know what to make of it. I'm going Arizona, but again, I feel like every time we think Wisconsin's out, they're in. When they're in, they're out. So headed on there. It's an interesting game nonetheless.
Well, I feel like they have that almost like mid-2000s Virginia-esque way of making you change the pace of the game and making you play uncomfortably. Like they don't play pack line like Virginia does, but like I feel like they are really good at controlling the tempo of the game and making you play how they want to play. And sometimes when you get these teams out of rhythm, teams that are used to going up and down the floor 100 times, and all of a sudden it's 70, that can be enough just to make the game interesting, not to win the game, but all of a sudden just to make the game interesting, because you're not in that usual rhythm.
Greg, correct me if I'm wrong. This was the game that was that Chase Field last year? It was at a baseball stadium in Arizona. It wasn't. I don't think it was a true road. One of the Arizona played a game at Chase Field, and I think it was Wisconsin they played it at. And then this is like, so technically a neutral site. This is technically this is a true road game. So we'll have to look that up and figure it out. But that was just something I was thinking about that was familiar from last year, at least to me. Well, Greg looks it up. I'll start previewing in the next game. We can get to the answer here in a little bit. But Greg, we went to this game last year. It was Ohio State and Texas A&M. We went to the Ohio State version. This is the return game to Texas A&M. Now, this is interesting for a couple reasons. Ohio State looks pretty good to start the year. Both teams are now ranked, and obviously at Texas A&M after that loss to UCF, we'll have to see what they really got and how Wade Taylor is going to do in this game.
Just as an update, all I've got so far is Chase Jeter and Chase Budinger. So I can't find anything on that matchup. I'm not saying you're wrong. Maybe I'm not a good Googler. Joe is right. We did go to this game last year. We went to the first leg of the home and home. I'm picking Texas A&M just because I cannot stand to look at my sheet of picks and see that I picked 4 road teams to win on Friday. I like Texas A&M to maybe bounce back. I just I got to do something different. I probably feel better about Ohio State right now, but I know there's no way 4 road teams. It's just not going to happen. One of these upsets is going to happen. Ohio State is probably the team I feel, the least connected to or the least confident in. That's saying something because I think now they probably are, in the same vein as some of these other teams I just picked, as Marquette, Arizona, whatever. But I'll still take Texas A&M. I can't stand to pick 4 road teams on the same day. It's one of these teams is going to lose. That's.
You're right about that. I'm just taking based off of talent. I think the home environment, maybe I guess if I were to, I'm gonna pick all road teams. But if I were to pick one, I'd probably pick Maryland over Marquette. Obviously dealing without having Tyler Kolek could be a big thing. I'm worried about Texas A&M. This is probably a game they end up winning, so maybe I'm wrong. But worried about Texas A&M, where they're gonna get the scoring outside of Wade Taylor. That front court rotation is just so weird to me. Hayden Hefner again was supposed to provide some shooting. He lost playing time last year because he didn't shoot well. Now he's in the starting lineup. Manny Obaseki's out. Buzz Williams is a tough coach. I think he gets figured out, but too many weird things going on. So I'll go Ohio State, who I do really like. I really do like Bruce Thornton, Amici Johnson, and John Mobley as key guards they're going to have. And I do like that they provide kind of like I talked about Kentucky guards being different last year, having different talents and everything, and that's kind of what makes them great. I kind of think they have a little bit of the same element there. So I think Ohio State is the team I'm going to go with. Also looked up the Chase Field thing. I couldn't find anything. I know they played a game at Chase Field. I just can't figure out who it was. So we'll update people next week if we find out the answer to that. But Greg, those are our picks for the week. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, these are games that I didn't think were worth picking, but I got kind of a list of games that might be worth watching. We talked about McNeese a little bit in the preseason. They are playing Bama this week. Villanova, St. Joe's, that is a Big 5 matchup, and St. Joe's has some talent, and that game could. I mean, if they after losing to Columbia, you lose to an A10 team that's also in the same city, I don't know, whatever's hotter than Mercury or Venus is where he might be sitting on the sun, literally. Don't lose that game if you're Kyle Neptune. Xavier Wake Forest resuming the Skip Prosser Classic, obviously coached at both schools. I totally missed this one. I didn't put it on our outline, Joe, but New Mexico is playing at St. John's this week.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think about it's the Patino matchup.
Yep.
So I think that's maybe not worth picking, but worth your time to watch. And Grand Canyon plays at Arizona State. I talked about Grand Canyon in the preseason. They might be decent. We just saw Arizona State take Gonzaga to the wire. So again, games I didn't think was worth picking, but there's not it's not a full week. It's a little bit of a lighter week outside of the Champions Classic. So if you're looking for a couple games to watch, those were just kind of ones that I might find myself watching.
I'll raise you too, Greg, because I think there's a couple on Saturday too. South Carolina, Indiana. Now, South Carolina's already lost this year, but Indiana doesn't look good. just watch out for that. I think Mike Woodson maybe just, I don't know if he's checked out or like just doesn't like plays like an old NBA team rather than like a young college team. And then Colorado State and Ole Miss on Saturday as well. Ole Miss struggled with Grambling this week. Colorado State, Nick Clifford and everything. I don't know. I'm just saying there's other games we want to watch out for.
Two things to add. I'm putting this on record so it's recorded. I did pick Colorado State in our Joe and I with some of our friends have like a weekly. We pick every ranked game. Ole Miss is ranked, so it's one of the games that we picked. And you mentioned South Carolina and Indiana. That was another game that I kind of looked at, but the only thing we didn't mention was North Florida beating. They beat. You're gonna have to remind me who else they beat. They beat South Carolina, and they also beat. Was it Georgia Tech or what?
Yep.
Who was it?
Georgia Tech and the Charleston Southern too. Just throw them in. They have 3 wins, but like 2 power conference wins for sure.
Yeah, so they were picked. I've heard it like 16 times today, so I'm going to say it. They were picked 7th in the ASUN preseason poll. I only know that because I've heard it 17,000 times today. But I got some pretty good wins so far.
Watch out, Greg. Guess who they're playing next?
I don't know. You want me to guess or
Georgia?
It just happened to be up.
Just what? I mean, they play Georgia, they play Nebraska, they play Florida. So these other teams need to watch out. I can confidently say I've not watched North Florida yet. I'm excited to watch them a little bit, maybe tomorrow, with a slate that is like, hey, we'll have on the big screen the Champions Classic, but maybe on a smaller screen. Figure it out.
That game could be like if one of these nights next week where there's not a lot on, that game could be worth watching just because you got Asa Newell at Georgia that's worth watching. And maybe we learn something about this North Florida team. Maybe it's just an anomaly that they win these 2 early games, or maybe they hang tight with Georgia and it starts to be like, could this be a 12 or a 13 seed that wins a game in the tournament?
Yeah, definitely worth checking out for all the reasons mentioned there. I will remind everyone again, as our closing thoughts here, to like and subscribe the Game House YouTube channel. That's where we'll have our podcast on video form. And then if you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leaving us a review is always helpful. Making sure you give us a star rating is always helpful, whether you like us or love us. You can roast us if you want. You can say whatever you want about us. It'd be kind of fun to read those. But that always helps us out. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.